evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are in our 32nd year, I talk to writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished in the past, what they're planning for the future. It's a slightly wider net than writers, however. We have had on a few times other brands of artists. We have had on painters, we have had on musicians, we have had on a couple of sculptors. So if you have an idea for a person, a talented, creative person who might be a good fit for the Writer's Block, writer or other brand, watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd be very happy to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming produced by 1623 Studios is the result of cable access television. So don't feed your tube with any other source than cable. Don't go to Dish. You stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. Tonight, I'm very happy to say we do have a writer. Her name is Kate Ranta, and she has written a serious, even profound book about the topic of domestic violence. Kate is originally from New Jersey, although when she was growing up and going to high school at Lacey Township, she summered in Cape Ann with her family and has eventually returned to Cape Ann. She went to school at Purdue University and Franklin and Marshall College and moved permanently to Cape Ann just 2 years ago. The book she wrote, Killing Kate, is based on her own experience, and we're going to be exploring that during our half hour. Kate Ranta, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I just forgot. I said just before the show, I said I was going to hold this up and I would do it and make sure that our excellent director, Becky Coyle, can get a nice close-up of this book. This is the book I was referring to and meant to hold it up first thing, Killing Kate by Kate Ranta. Thank you for being on the show, Kate.
You're welcome.
Now, I mentioned that this is based on your experience.
It is.
Tell us, before we get into the details of the book, what happened?
Well, I mean, it's a long story, obviously, but in a nutshell, I met my ex-husband on an online dating site. People were starting to meet each other that way. I was a single mom, and our relationship moved very quickly. I was engaged to him within 3 months. We were married within 6 months, and I was pregnant with our son. But during that time, his behavior was strange, and I didn't know what was happening. And ultimately, what it was emotional abuse and increasingly controlling behavior. Controlling my friendships, my, relationships with others. We moved to an Army base, and that was further isolating. But it was very confusing while I was in it because growing up, I think what I thought was abuse was if a guy hits you. Yeah. Right? If it's physical abuse. Or if he yells at you and calls you names too, that's pretty bad. But I didn't know about power and control and
bullying.
And the belittling and the ways that it's insidious, and it's kind of like water torture, drip, drip over time until you're in this situation and you feel like you can't get out. We were married. I had, a baby with him. We had bought a house together. There's just all of these things that keep you in this relationship. But then we had what I call the first physical incident where he threatened to hit me. He raised his fist at me, and that sent me out the door. And then that set off a chain of events for like a year and a half of me trying to extricate myself and keep myself and, you know, my family safe from him. And he was stalking me, you know, constantly texting me, emailing me, making threats over custody, all of our son, that kind of stuff. Very contentious, not on my part. I just wanted to divorce him and be done. But he wouldn't, he was relentless. And so then, right, it climaxed with attempted murder. He tried to kill me and my father, and it was in front of our son.
You and your father were in the house, and with your son, and he was on the other side of the door.
Correct. It was ambush style. He had stalked me to my new apartment, and as my father was going to leave, we noticed that his car was in the parking lot, and he was getting out of the car. My dad came in. We were trying to close the door, and he was on the other side pushing against it. And yeah, it went from there. We heard gunshots, and
he fired
a gun. We didn't even know he had a gun when he showed up at the door. We thought he was just trying to bully his way in, and who, you know, he just kept saying, I just want to talk to Kate. I just want to talk to Kate. But then.
And he wounded you and your father.
Yes. I was hit twice, and my father was hit twice, and both of us survived.
You both survived.
Yes.
The emotional experience, it's hard, impossible really to imagine what you went through. And I know it's still fresh from some of the reviews I've seen and some of the book I've looked at. How did you begin to emotionally recover and deal with it to the point where you're talking on TV and writing a book about something that's so horrible and difficult?
So I would say the first year after the shooting was focused on.
And what year was the year?
2012. It was
12.
Actually, we just hit the 9-year anniversary of the shooting this past November 2nd. So it was November 2nd, 2012. And so for the first almost year after that, I did a lot of occupational therapy on my hand because one of the bullets went through my right hand, and I had to have surgery the next morning, and it was like stuck like this. So I had to do occupational therapy to get the hand moving again so I could function. I mean, half of it's numb, and I still have nerve damage and numbness, but it's never going to be the same. I lost bone, I lost a knuckle. But I mean, I have my hand. And it, you know, I can use it, but it's just not the same. So I would say the first year was really focused a lot on that physical healing. But friends of mine, when I was in the hospital, had started this Facebook page. Originally it was called Love and Support for Kate, Ranta, and Family. And it was a place where, from the very beginning, I mean, they asked my permission if they could do this. And it was a central place where people who loved and cared about me and knew and wanted to know what was happening and how we were doing could go to, you know, on Facebook and get updates. And so when I got home from the hospital, I took over that page myself. And it was pretty much right then and there that I knew, because I'm an English major, I've had a long career in editorial and marketing. I'm a words person, always have been. It's just, it's like one of my strengths, you know? And so I thought, I was so angry that it had happened at all, and that the systems that are in place to supposedly protect women and children from this exact thing that happened had failed across the board. And I really wanted to shine a spotlight on that. And I really wanted to process what had happened and work through a lot of the early guilt that I had, and try to come to an understanding that like this wasn't my fault.
That the guilt is a problem with abuse.
It is
very, very often. And it seems to someone on the outside, especially a male, say, "Well, I don't understand. How can you feel guilty? It's the other guy. It's the guy."
Right.
Where does that come from?
It's well, unfortunately, when women and men find themselves, I think, in an abusive relationship, there's a lot of like shame, a feeling of shame in that, and how did I let this happen to myself? How did I get here? How I shouldn't be putting up with this.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of like the early guilt. Well, I mean, frankly, right away, a lot of the guilt was that my father was there and that he was physically harmed and emotionally harmed. I mean, we both are diagnosed with PTSD, like complex PTSD as a result of this trauma. My son as well, that my son was there. I mean.
And he's 13 now?
He's 13. And yeah, so it was very difficult and a long road to work through the guilt, but I did get there. But I think that writing about it and being really open about it was both empowering for me, and I wanted to help other people and not be quiet about it, because it shouldn't have happened. And people don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
And
I've had other guests say that this has to be talked about because it makes people uncomfortable, and they'd rather just please go away.
So I've always approached this like an open book and said, I want, no question is off the table. Like, I will talk about anything related to this and what was going on behind closed doors, because I think that's been the problem around violence against women and domestic violence, is that it's like, oh, that's a private matter, and this is what happens in the home, and that's not something that we talk about or we ask about. No.
And that leads to the legal system, where people don't report to the legal system, or the legal system itself ignores. And you said all the support systems don't function.
Yeah, I mean, after the incident where he raised his fist at me, I went and got a temporary restraining order against him. And he had many guns in our home because he was military. He was a major in the Air Force. And so he had a lot of guns in the home. And when I got the temporary restraining order, this had happened in Florida. Our incident happened while I was living in Florida. We were told that they could go in, police could go in and take the guns that were in the home under the temporary restraining order, but then they turned around and said, well, he can go out, although he can go out tomorrow and buy more. He can go buy a new gun.
Florida.
Right. So, I was doing the things, I was taking the steps and doing the things that everybody says women should do when they find themselves in an abusive relationship. I did leave, I left when he was threatening physical violence. I went and got the restraining order. They removed the guns, but we still weren't safe. And then he was also violating the restraining order in lots of ways. He broke into our home. I moved into a different apartment, and he had broken into that. I could never prove it. They would never look for him. They wouldn't arrest him. He would do like online cyber stalking type of stuff. He created a fake Facebook account to try to communicate with me. Under the restraining order, he wasn't supposed to do that. I was able to prove that it was him. They did nothing. The judge kept extending the temporary restraining order. He wouldn't make it permanent. He kept saying, well, you two are going to have to be civil at some point for the sake of the child. Not understanding that this is a psychopath. You can't co-parent with a psychopath.
Kind of a duh moment.
Exactly. So it was just all of these things where it's like, it really opened my eyes to the legal system and law enforcement, just how it feels a lot like the perpetrators, like the bad people, are enabled. And the victims, the actual victims who are trying to get away from these people, are just stonewalled every step of the way.
And this is all in the book,
This is all in the
Killing
book.
Kate.
Yep.
Is there a section in that, a page or two, that you might read to give the audience a feel for the content and the style?
Sure. So I've picked, let's see, chapter 38 is called I Told You So. This kind of goes with what we were talking about.
Okay, good.
So it happened mind-blowingly fast, ambush style, no time to think. Tom started pushing on the front door to my apartment to force his way in. I was on the phone with 911. In the recording of the 911 call, they could hear me say, "My estranged husband is here and he's trying to force himself into the home." My dad and I were pushing on the door from the inside to keep Tom out. They were facing the front door, pushing as hard as we could with both hands. I was on the left, Dad was on the right near the door handle. Dad was trying to lock it and he could see the side of Tom's face. Little William, who was 4 years old, was standing just behind us. "I just want to talk to Kate. I just want to talk to Kate. I just want to talk to Kate," Tom kept repeating. Then bang, bang, bang. Bullets came blasting through the door. We didn't even know he had a gun. It was animalistic screaming I heard coming from my mouth, a sound I'd never heard before, ever. I backed up to the kitchen table. My dad went the other way, toward the couch, and William was standing in the middle. Tom entered with the gun drawn, and he pointed it at me. Bang. My right hand exploded in front of my face. I felt pain. I never felt pain like that before. My hand went limp. It was dangling. I couldn't move it. I fell to the ground, but as I did, my hand went behind me and blood splattered up the wall. I knew I was in trouble. I hit the ground. Terrorized, I screamed at the top of my lungs, begging him not to do it, not to shoot again. "Why did you take my stuff?" he yelled. "Why did you take my stuff? Why did you take my military stuff? Was it worth it?" He screamed none of that cliche stuff that men say when they've done bad things to a woman, like, "I miss my son," or "I just want us to be a family," or "If I can't have you, no one will." No, he was yelling about the belongings I'd taken from the house to my new apartment, the things I'd put on my credit cards. As for the military stuff, I still don't know what he was talking about. I was begging, screaming, and apologizing for taking the stuff anyway. "I'll give it back to you," I pleaded. Anything to get him not to shoot me in the head, because that's what I was waiting for. "Tom, please, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I begged. "I'll return it. I'll give everything back. Don't do this." Tom looked at me. He was drunk with power. "I killed your brother, Kate. He took my mountain bike." "No," I screamed. I couldn't take it. He looked smug. He was enjoying torturing me. At one point, he turned and went over to my father, who was on the ground. My dad knew he had been shot and was attempting to call 911 from his cell phone. Tom ordered him to drop his phone and push it away. Then I heard bang. Then I heard a grunt. Again, I screamed, "No!" Tom came back toward me again. I managed to crawl farther away from him. I was sliding on the floor in my own blood. I was completely covered in my blood. I could smell it. My hair was slick and sticking to my head. My clothes clung to me. I felt limp, and my hand was throbbing. I laid there looking between the table and chair legs. He used a 9mm Beretta to shoot us, one with a red laser on it. He was shining the laser at me between the table and the legs on the chair, taunting me with every move. William was on the other side of the table in the middle of the room. After Tom shot my dad, he went over and knelt down next to Will. It was quiet for a moment. And then, "Don't do it, Daddy. Don't shoot Mommy." William, my 4-year-old son, found the words.
Wow, that is strong stuff.
Yeah.
Very strong stuff. I'd say I want to compliment you that your English background's reflected in that. I mean, because you can pick a million different details, but you picked the best, the evocative kind of details that are going to get across to an audience.
Thank you.
What kind of reaction have you had to the book?
Amazing feedback. People that have read it have said that they can't put it down. They literally have to read and keep reading because they want to know what happens, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. I think, I think it really has resonated with a lot of people. both people that have been victims and are survivors of this sort of thing, and people that aren't. I've had plenty of friends and people on my Facebook that are supporters that even aren't survivors themselves that have reacted to this.
Do you have people coming up to you who have been abused saying, you've given me enough guts to come out and talk and not feel guilt? And
I have. I get more so on, because everybody's on social media. So I get a lot of that in my inbox on my public Facebook page that I use as advocacy now, the page that was started when I was in the hospital. I remember within the first, I want to say 6 months of having that page, so it would have been early 2013, a young woman messaged me privately and had said that she found my page and was following my story. And, because I spoke out and because of what I went through, she found the courage to get out of her own abusive relationship with a member of the military. Because she was scared and she was in a really bad situation, and she wanted to get out, and we're still friends on social media to this day. So at the beginning it was like, if I can help one person, and then I did pretty quickly.
And then you have these national connections now. Where is she? What part of the country is she from?
She was living with her abuser, I want to say in Ohio, but she's actually in Florida now. And ironically, her mother lived not too far from where I was in Florida.
Whoa.
But yeah.
But it's nice to have that reach.
Yeah.
So
I'd reached somebody.
Still relatively new media.
It
goes
wasn't
everywhere.
regional. It was nationwide, and then international reach. There's people as far as Australia that follow.
So, I want to ask a couple of technical questions.
Sure.
You were an English major, so you had some experience in writing, and you knew what you wanted to write about.
I did.
What was the timeline? When did you first decide, I'm going to write a book, to the time when you wrote the last word?
So I had wanted to write a book right from the start, but I just was not in any mental space to tackle that right away. But it was on my radar right from the beginning, because again, back to the awareness thing, I really wanted to encapsulate in one place the details of what happened, and I knew that with writing in a book I could do that.
And it was therapeutic.
And it would be therapeutic, right? And it was like fits and starts that I would think about an outline, or maybe write a few things, but I just kept hitting, because it's so triggering to go back there, and just overwhelming to think about the whole concept of putting a book like this together. So I have a co-author named Elisa Devine, and what we did was she had interviewed me for another book that she was working on called #SheWins, which focuses on, I think there's 22 women in the book, and it's so all the various walks of life that women are in that experience domestic violence. So when she interviewed me for #SheWins, we spoke for about 3.5 hours. It took that long to get through my story, and at the end of it, she just looked at me and was like, Kate, your story, it really needs to be a book.
This is Elisa Devine.
Yes.
Who's and also the foreword is by a well-known actor, Evan Rachel Wood.
Correct.
Who she's been in often Westworld, and a little series I'm aware of, Dolly and M. So she's sympathetic and has some of the same experience.
She does. And Elisa is also a survivor of domestic violence. So we had that connection as it was, but we just had a really good rapport with each other. And when she told me that, it should be a book, I fully agreed. And I said, I just haven't been able to kickstart it. And she said, well, I would be honored, to work with you and get this done. So.
And then you started.
Yep.
And what date was that?
It was March of 2018. Yeah. So it was about an hour, a year and a half, the entire
Process from
process.
From that point to
So
getting
what we would do, what we originally started out was we just did like an outline of everything that happened. And then I would do all of these recordings in my voice, obviously, according to the outline, and describe what had happened and what was going on. And then she took it and put it on the, I guess, computer screen now and not to paper. But she brought it to life. And she did an amazing job, because it was very important to me that it sounded like me and it sounds like me. Everybody that knows me that's read it is like, I feel like you're sitting next to me telling me this story.
I can understand how difficult it must have been to review and go back.
It was awful. I did the editing.
When you were reading just now, it was moving you, I could tell.
Yeah.
And it's powerful. And I want to recommend it again. We're almost out of time.
Let's see.
We said before the show it would go fast. I want to show this again because I want everybody, what camera am I on? There. Oh, Becky Coyle can give another close-up of the cover of Killing Kate, the important book that Kate Ranta with Miss Alyssa wrote and is available. Where is this available, Kate?
Well, Personal Power Press, so that's the publisher. You can get it on that website, as well as Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Amazon,
online.
Barnes & Noble, Personal Power
Press.
Personal Power Press. This is the book. I suggest you buy it. Thank you very much for being on the Writer's Block.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
The Cape Ann will get this, and then it goes to YouTube.
Okay.
So sales will just
Yes.
help more people. Help more people.
You never know. You never know who's watching.
I want to thank our TV audience too for being with us on the Writer's Block. If you've learned something about the problem of domestic violence and guns, and the fact that they're not treated efficiently or fairly or legally in the United States right now, from Kate Ranta, then the Writer's Block has done its job. I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.